Recently, I was given the opportunity to interview the Owlcat's creative director for Pathfinder Kingmaker, Alexander Mishulin. Not only was I able to ask him all kinds of questions about their upcoming title Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, but also about how Pathfinder came to a digital medium in the first place. If you're a fan of Kingmaker and you want to know more about Wrath of the Righteous, watch on to find out. For those of you unfamiliar with Pathfinder, it has a rule set very similar to Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, which is actually where it takes its inspiration from. If you think of Dungeons & Dragons editions in a straight line, then just imagine Pathfinder branches off at 3.5 to create its own rule set that goes off in a different direction. If that doesn't ring any bells for you, then think of games like Neverwinter Nights, Icewind Dale 2, and Neverwinter Nights 2. These games all use a similar rule set to Pathfinder Kingmaker. When asked about why Pathfinder and not D&D, Alexander told me that he grew up playing D&D and eventually Pathfinder, and that he fell in love with the world, the locales, and the way it was built. Though he would spend many years developing games that were not Kingmaker, he finally got his chance after seeing games like Pillars of Eternity and Divinity Original Sin thrive on Kickstarter. Owlcat took a risk placing Kingmaker on Kickstarter, and the rest is history, with Kingmaker outselling Pillars of Eternity to Deadfire. Pathfinder Kingmaker was very much a learning experience for Owlcat, and Alexander freely admits it was not the smoothest of launches and wishes things had gone a bit differently. He mentioned that there were areas that broke down with bug testing, and that there were so many different choices and outcomes that didn't affect things until much later in the game that some things slipped between the cracks. This time around, he says that they are testing everything, and they even have a bot that is constantly running through the game testing random decisions and scenarios, reporting back what it finds. This is very important because if you didn't know, Kingmaker had over 1,000 skills and abilities that players could use, and Wrath of the Righteous will feature over double that amount, so they cannot afford to miss anything. That's a lot of testing. Additionally, this meticulousness this time around does not only extend to Wrath of the Righteous, but also Kingmaker's console release, which is due out by the end of the year. When I asked Alexander why it would be so late, he simply replied they wanted to make sure that the launch was perfect this time around, and he'd rather have a later launch date than a buggy game. For you console players, keep an eye out around Q3 or Q4 for the title, and we'll update you when we get an exact date. As I just mentioned, Wrath of the Righteous will feature over double the skills and abilities of Kingmaker, but that's not all it will have. Wrath of the Righteous will include new classes as it inches closer to its aim of including all Pathfinder classes into future titles. Additionally, it'll have a new system called Mythic Path that not only drastically changes the way the main characters played, but also heavily affects the outcome of the story. The ones that have been announced so far are Angel, Lich, Aeon, and Trickster. Wrath of the Righteous takes place in a completely new scenario with completely new characters and companions. This means you will not see the companions from Kingmaker make a return, but will have all new ones to play with and bring along in your adventures. Alexander did say they were toying with the idea of making some cameo appearances with the companions from Kingmaker, but that a final decision had not yet been made. Wrath of the Righteous will not feature a turn-based mode or any multiplayer of any kind. While Alexander noted that Owlcat really enjoyed the fan-made patch that allows for Kingmaker to be played in turn-based mode, they had no plans to implement it into Wrath of the Righteous. And while cooperative play is something that Alexander said they would love to see in future Pathfinder titles, they simply didn't have the resources to implement it properly into Wrath of the Righteous, and so they are focusing on making the best single-player experience possible. Owlcat has returned to Kickstarter with Wrath of the Righteous, and they've released new footage of the game that you've been watching here during this video. If you'd like to help support the game on Kickstarter, be sure to head over and make your pledge sometime in the next several weeks. Owlcat raised nearly 1 million USD from over 18,000 backers with the Kingmaker campaign, and all signs point to surpassing that this time around. Wrath of the Righteous is expected to release in Q2 next year. Owlcat is pretty adamant that they can make that goal and have a much smoother launch this time around to boot. Between Kingmaker on console and Wrath of the Righteous on PC, they'll have their hands full over the next year or so. They'll be at PAX East later this month and will be attending and getting some hands-on time with the game. So if you want more information about Wrath of the Righteous soon, stay tuned for more updates.